Mocking laughter vibrated through Richard Hamilton's lavish, mahogany-paneled office. The wealthy CEO, flushed with unbridled pride, was thoroughly enjoying himself, entertaining the board members with what he considered a clever jest, a joke in reality, deeply demeaning to his long-serving housekeeper. Yet, Richard remained utterly oblivious that this seemingly harmless prank would ignite a chain of events destined to irrevocably alter the course of his life. The boisterous laughter echoed off the polished wood and sparkling crystal filling the opulent room. At the very heart of this extravagant celebration stood Richard Hamilton, the powerful CEO of Hamilton Technologies, his face aglow with champagne and boundless self-satisfaction. Having just clinched an astounding $3 billion deal, he felt utterly invincible, as if he truly stood on top of the world. His senior executives surrounded him, fawning like courtiers, greeting his every utterance with obsequious, almost worshipful laughter. "What a fantastic night, isn't it?" Richard boomed, his voice resonating with triumph as he hoisted his champagne glass high. His gaze swept across the table, where his wealthy and influential colleagues vied to shower him with praise. "Absolutely, Richard. Nobody else could have pulled this off," chimed in Robert Andrews, the executive vice president, his cheeks flushed both from drink and shared pride. "Thank you. Thank you." Richard nodded smugly, a subtle mocking smile playing on his lips. His eyes then drifted, settling on a figure quietly moving near the entrance, preparing to clear the glasses from the table. It was Claire Thompson, a black woman in her 40s, the maid who had dutifully served his family for over 2 decades. As if struck by a sudden, wicked notion, Richard's lips curled into an even wider smirk. "Claire, come here for a moment," he called out, his voice sharp. Claire flinched at the abrupt summons, a flicker of confusion briefly betraying her eyes, but she quickly composed herself. After 2 decades of enduring his imperious orders and casual taunts, she was accustomed to such treatment. The woman approached the table with her head bowed, attempting to shield her face from the contemptuous stares that now pierced her from all sides. Richard grabbed a thick dossier from the table, its bulk significant, and thrust it toward her. The stack of documents was written entirely in Chinese, packed with dense, impenetrable technical jargon. "Claire," he began, his tone dripping with mock seriousness, "my lawyers have sent over this technical contract from our Chinese partner, and apparently not even our in-house translation team can make sense of it." He paused for dramatic effect, his mocking grin widening further. "Translate this for me by tomorrow morning, and I'll pay you my entire monthly salary, $500,000. His outrageous proclamation instantly set the room alight with cruel, uninhibited laughter. Those piercing gazes felt like sharp knives plunging into Claire's already bruised dignity. The powerful executives stared at her, their expressions a mixture of amusement and anticipation, as if waiting for her to falter and collapse under the weight of their merciless joke. "Oh, Richard, you're so heartless!" Diane Sterling, the CFO, exclaimed between bursts of laughter covering her mouth. "You know, a maid like her has no hope of translating something this complex, right?" the millionaire sneered. The maid's calm response left him momentarily speechless. "How wicked," Richard shrugged, feigning nonchalance. "It's all in good fun, Diane. Honestly, I'm giving Claire a once-in-a-lifetime chance. Not everyone gets to earn $500,000 overnight. The laughter crashed over Claire like a merciless wave, while scornful, racially tinged glances felt like daggers slicing into her very resolve. Her heart pounded, and her hand gripped the dossier so tightly that her knuckles whitened. In that suffocating moment, it felt as though all the pain and humiliation she'd bottled up for 20 years were crushing her spirit. But Claire did not tremble. Instead, she lifted her head, and for the very first time her determined gaze met Richard Hamilton's. A strange, heavy silence fell over the room as Claire's fearless eyes locked onto his astonished stare. "I accept your challenge, Mr. Hamilton," she declared, her voice remarkably steady, cutting through the silence. Richard hesitated for a beat, then erupted into even louder laughter, quickly joined by those around him, their mirth laced with cruel ridicule. "Excellent! I'll expect your flawless translation by tomorrow morning, Claire," he declared, lifting his glass for a long sip. "But don't worry if you fail. I won't hold it against you after all," he added, shooting Claire a malicious glance. "I never expected much from you to begin with." Claire bowed politely, then turned on her heel and stepped out of the opulent room. The mocking laughter trailed behind her, each echo a harsh reminder of her lowly status in the eyes of the powerful. Yet, deep within her, something profound had been ignited. A fierce flame of self-respect and a burning hunger for justice, suppressed for 2 decades. As she walked down the long, cold hallway, her eyes blazed with an unyielding resolve and newfound strength. She would prove to them that beneath her humble exterior and the skin they scorned lay intelligence, dignity, and extraordinary power, qualities they would never dare underestimate again. The mocking laughter still echoed behind Claire, pursuing her like relentless ghosts. As she closed the grand door leading into the long corridor, the pale, golden glow of the crystal chandeliers dimmed, giving way to the familiar yet utterly cold silence of the mansion's depths. Claire walked slowly, her legs feeling as heavy as lead, dragging across the luxurious red carpet, a single strip of which was worth more than her entire annual income. Each step sounded like a painful reminder of the vast gulf between her humble station in life and the glamorous world of the powerful. But what truly pierced her heart was not merely the stark wealth disparity, but the contemptuous stares and deep-seated disdain aimed at her simply because she was a black woman. Claire finally reached the kitchen, the only place in this sprawling mansion where she could truly find any semblance of comfort. Her trembling hand gently set the thick technical dossier, bristling with intricate Chinese characters, onto the cold marble countertop. She drew in a slow, steadying breath, trying desperately to calm the tumult within her. She was accustomed to enduring her wealthy employer's casual ridicule and condescension, but tonight, Richard Hamilton's vicious insult had left her choking on her own surging emotions. For more than 20 years, Claire Thompson had served the Hamilton family with unwavering loyalty. From the moment she first set foot in this grand estate, she'd tried to stay invisible, quietly fulfilling her duties without ever expecting recognition from her employers. To them, Claire was never truly human. She was merely a tool, a convenient object, easily forgotten when not needed. Claire clearly remembered every moment she'd cared for the Hamilton children, Emma and Lucas, from the instant they were born. The long nights tending their fevers, soothing their nightmares, calming their childhood fears. She loved them as if they were her own, even though she knew that once grown, they would look at her with the same cold distance as their parents. And so it happened. As Emma and Lucas reached adulthood, they gradually forgot the woman who had silently stood behind every success and safety in their childhood. Her loneliness deepened when Mrs. Hamilton, Richard's wife, fell gravely ill. Claire was the only one devoted to her care, witnessing day after day the proud woman's gradual decline under the merciless onslaught of cancer. In Mrs. Hamilton's final days, she weakly clasped Claire's hand, her eyes shining with a gratitude she could never express in words. In that moment, Claire felt a rare warmth in this otherwise icy household. But when Mrs. Hamilton passed away, Richard's cruelty only intensified. Claire returned to her old role, slipping once again into the shadows that defined her existence, bearing every scornful glance and hurtful remark, knowing it was the price she paid to survive here. The most painful truth was that in all those 20 years, Richard never once cared about Claire's personal life. He never knew that she had a small family, once harbored grand dreams, or how much she'd sacrificed to secure a safe life and bright future for her loved ones. To Richard, Claire was just a black maid, unworthy of attention, unworthy of respect or empathy. Claire had always believed she could endure that, contempt and racism forever. But tonight, Richard's cruel joke and mocking challenge had awakened something deep within her. For the first time in many years, she felt anger, a surge of outrage mingled with self-respect and a burning desire to reclaim her dignity. Standing alone in the silent kitchen, Claire gripped the Chinese dossier tighter. She knew this challenge was about more than money. It was her chance to restore her honor and prove she was not the worthless nobody Richard and his elite circle thought her to be. She picked up her phone and sent a quick message to an old friend, Professor Jonathan Reed, who had worked with her before life took her in a different direction. A fierce determination washed over her as she hit send. Tonight would be long. A grueling battle between prejudice and pride. Glancing at the wall clock, she saw the hands inching toward midnight. She inhaled deeply, her eyes reflecting a strength she had never felt in 20 years of living in the shadows. Tonight she would step out of the darkness, not for money, not for fame, but to reclaim the dignity that had been trampled for far too long. With her resolve ignited, Claire opened the dossier. The complex characters before her eyes felt like a dare. She offered a small, confident smile, no longer afraid or despondent, for she knew that tomorrow, when the morning light streamed through the grand windows, she would no longer be an invisible woman, scorned and overlooked. She would be Claire Thompson, a person worthy of being seen, respected, and recognized for her true worth. The soft golden light in the kitchen fell across Claire's face as she focused intently on each complex line of Chinese characters in the dossier. The familiar symbols began to emerge, as if greeting an old friend she hadn't seen in years. Claire gave a faint, bitter smile at that recognition, a feeling she had once cherished, but had been forced to bury long ago. She paused, her eyes drifting into the darkness beyond the window. Her mind unintentionally slipped back to a past she'd carefully tucked away, like a secret treasure known only to herself. 20 years ago, Claire Thompson wasn't Claire Thompson at all. She was Dr. Michelle Carter, a renowned academic at Stanford University. Dr. Michelle Carter's name appeared in leading scholarly journals on linguistics, technical translation, and intercultural communication. Her lectures were always packed, and international conferences eagerly reserved her a place at the podium. At that time, Michelle had everything: a brilliant career, an impeccable reputation in academia, and a future she had spent her youth meticulously building. Then it all came crashing down so fast, she never had a chance to understand what was happening. One fateful day, Michelle was summoned to a meeting with the university board. The familiar faces of her colleagues, once friends, now stared at her with chilling coldness. No one defended her when the accusations were laid out: academic fraud, plagiarism in her research, serious breaches of professional ethics. Michelle tried to explain, presenting clear evidence of her integrity, but no one would listen. Only then did she realize this was not a simple misunderstanding, but a calculated scheme to remove her, the only black woman on the tenured faculty, from a coveted position. Finally, the university dismissed her, wiping away the reputation she had built over years. Her honor and career collapsed beneath baseless allegations. Michelle knew she'd been framed, but she was powerless against a system that had always treated her as an outsider, an unwanted element. She attempted to sue the university, but every door slammed shut in her face. Her lawyers conceded that given her race and social standing, she stood little chance of justice in an environment dedicated to protecting the reputations of powerful white figures. Having lost everything, Michelle Carter made the agonizing choice to disappear from her former life, to abandon her name and fame, to shield herself from further attacks. She took the name Claire Thompson, moved to a distant city, and quietly found a lowly, anonymous job, one that would allow her to be easily forgotten. Housekeeping proved the perfect cover to hide her past and true identity. For 20 years, Claire lived like a ghost, relinquishing all her ambitions and desires in pursuit of peace in the safety of obscurity. Yet no matter how deeply she buried her history, the wounds never truly healed. Sitting silently in the kitchen, Claire's heart still ached at memories of former colleagues who turned away and of students who adored her, now looking at her with suspicion and disappointment. All because she was a successful black woman exceeding the limits society expected from people like her. Now, after 2 decades under the shadow of that painful past, Claire once again faced Richard Hamilton's mockery and contempt. A wealthy man who believed power and money entitled him to demean anyone, especially a black woman like her. But this time was very different. Claire was no longer the fragile woman powerless before authority. Over the past 20 years, she had endured and learned a priceless lesson in resilience and endurance. Now, Claire Thompson resolved she would not remain silent. She would fight to reclaim her honor and her worth, things she should never have lost in the first place. Her gaze returned to the page. Those intricate Chinese characters no longer felt like a challenge, but like old friends beckoning her back to her true self. Dr. Michelle Carter had not lost her talent or her sharp mind. They were merely waiting to awaken, ready to prove her true value. Claire offered a small, determined smile, and pen in hand, began meticulously annotating each word, crafting precise, accurate translations. She felt the fire of resolve burn brighter than ever, ready to incinerate every prejudice and injustice she'd endured over the years. Tonight, Michelle Carter would no longer be a name buried in the past. Tonight, she returned as Claire Thompson, a woman poised to reclaim justice, dignity, and her right to live with the true value she had always deserved. The wall clock chimed twice, marking 2 a.m. Claire rubbed her eyes, her shoulders aching from hours spent hunched over the narrow desk in the cramped maid's quarters. Before her lay pages packed with interwoven Chinese and English notes. bathed in the soft amber glow of the desk lamp. Her face was drawn with fatigue, yet set with unshakable resolve. Though her translation skills were as sharp as ever, this was no ordinary document. The deep technical jargon on information technology and cybersecurity made Claire realize she needed help to guarantee absolute accuracy. After a brief hesitation, she picked up her phone and dialed the one person she'd quietly stayed in touch with over the years, Jonathan Reed, her former Stanford colleague, and the only person who had ever fully believed in her innocence during the wrongful scandal years ago. The phone rang on and on before Jonathan finally answered, his voice groggy but laced with concern. "Claire, is everything okay?" Claire's heart pounded, hearing that familiar tone. She inhaled deeply to steady herself. "Jonathan, I'm sorry to call so late. I really need your help with something urgent." Instantly alert, Jonathan's voice turned serious. "Go ahead. I'm listening." "I'm translating a technical agreement for a technology partnership with a Chinese firm," Claire explained briskly, her tone cautious. "It's full of complex cybersecurity and intellectual property terms I need to verify. Can you help?" Without a moment's hesitation, Jonathan replied, "Absolutely. Email it to me right now. I'll look at it immediately." Claire exhaled with relief and quickly sent the scanned document. As she waited for Jonathan's review, she couldn't stop replaying the troubling details she'd uncovered. Something was very wrong with this contract. Something dangerous concealed beneath layers of technical wording that even Hamilton Technology's own lawyers had missed. Less than 30 minutes later, Claire's phone rang again. She answered breathlessly, her heart racing at Jonathan's tense voice on the other end. "Claire, I've gone through the contract. You're right. This isn't a standard partnership agreement. Some clauses are extremely cunning, deliberately using technical language to mask the real issues." Claire felt blood chill in her veins. "Can you explain?" Jonathan's tone grew grave. "They've embedded a clause granting the Chinese company full access to Hamilton Technology's core security systems as soon as the contract is signed. On top of that, another provision transfers all intellectual property rights for the collaboratively developed technologies to their Shanghai subsidiary. It's a highly sophisticated technology takeover, potentially worth billions." Claire's limbs went cold. Richard Hamilton, the man she regarded as her personal enemy for his racist contempt, had no idea he stood on the brink of losing his entire empire. Even more heartbreaking, thousands of ordinary employees like her would suffer catastrophic losses if this plot succeeded. "Jonathan, are you absolutely sure?" Claire asked, her voice trembling. "Absolutely," Jonathan affirmed. "Claire, you've uncovered a serious conspiracy, and you must be extremely careful. These people are not to be underestimated. If they realize you know the truth, they could do anything to silence you." Claire gripped the phone with renewed clarity. She understood that this was no mere personal challenge. She was on the front lines of a life-or-death struggle between justice and power, truth and the bottomless greed of the wealthy. "I understand, Jonathan. Thank you so much," Claire whispered. "Stay safe, Claire," Jonathan urged. "I'm here for you. Call me if anything happens." After hanging up, Claire sat in the darkness for a long moment. The weak amber light fell across her fully translated pages, clear, precise, unflinching. She realized she could no longer shrink from her responsibility or hide in the shadows. Tonight had become her crucible, forcing her to confront the ghosts of her past and granting her one final chance to prove she was stronger than the injustices and prejudices that had pushed her into obscurity. Rising, Claire walked to the small window and gazed out at the sky, faintly brightening with dawn. A new day was about to begin, one in which Claire Thompson would no longer be the invisible woman. She would step into the light and face the powerful to defend justice and truth. Her eyes were steady, her spirit ablaze with fierce determination, because tonight had awakened the strong woman she had long ago lost. The pale dawn light slowly crept through the grand windows, gently rousing the Hamilton estate from its slumber. Claire sat quietly in the familiar little kitchen, her eyes fixed on the translation she'd spent the entire night perfecting. The neatly arranged pages were precise in every detail, accompanied by thorough notes on the contract's hidden, dangerous clauses. Claire's gaze was calm and resolute, yet her heart pounded, for she knew that in just a few minutes her life would change forever. Heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway, followed by Richard Hamilton's commanding voice. "Everyone, head to the conference room. Let's finalize the last steps of our deal with our Chinese partner." Claire rose, smoothed her uniform one last time, and stepped out of the kitchen with rare confidence. In her hands, she carried the translated document and her critical annotations, meticulously prepared and crystal clear. A flutter of nerves rose in her chest, but she understood fully the magnitude of this moment. As Claire entered the spacious boardroom, every pair of eyes turned toward her, a mix of surprise and annoyance on their faces. Richard's brow furrowed. He was clearly displeased to see her in a space he considered the exclusive domain of the powerful. "Claire, what are you doing here?" Richard snapped, impatience lacing his tone. Claire walked to the head of the table and placed the dossier in front of him, her expression composed as she faced her powerful employer. "I've completed the translation you requested last night, Mr. Hamilton," she said, her voice steady and clear. "I believe everyone should review it before signing the contract." Murmurs rippled across the room as the executives exchanged skeptical, mocking glances. Richard raised an eyebrow and scoffed. He couldn't fathom that a black maid like Claire could accomplish what even his expert translators couldn't. "You're joking, right, Claire?" he sneered. "You really think you're capable of understanding something this complex?" "I'm not joking, sir," Claire replied firmly, her voice unwavering. "Please read through this translation." Reluctantly, Richard picked up the folder and began to read, a mocking smile still on his face. But within minutes, that smile vanished, replaced first by confusion, then by stark fear. "What is this?" he muttered, his hand trembling as he flipped through the pages. The other directors quickly opened the translation themselves, their faces draining of color. A heavy silence fell as they all grasped the severity of the dangerous clauses Claire had uncovered. Finally, Claire broke the silence in a calm but powerful voice. "As you can see, this document contains provisions your prior translation team missed. These clauses would transfer all intellectual property rights to the Chinese partner and grant them full access to our company's internal security systems, risking the theft of technology worth billions." Richard leapt to his feet, pale and trembling with panic and anger. "How did you know this? How could a maid possibly—" he stammered, disbelief etched on his face. Claire met his gaze without flinching. "Because I was once a linguistics professor at Stanford University specializing in technical translation, I understand these complex terms better than anyone in this room. I've warned you here to prevent this company from suffering catastrophic losses." The room fell into absolute silence. The very executives who had dismissed her now stared at Claire as if seeing her for the first time, eyes full of astonishment, shame, and deep regret. Richard slumped back into his chair, covering his face with shaking hands. He felt the full weight of humiliation and helplessness before a woman he'd spent 20 years treating as invisible. "Claire, I don't know what to say. You've just saved this entire company from disaster," Richard murmured, stripped of his usual arrogance. "I don't need your thanks, Mr. Hamilton," Claire replied quietly. "But I hope you remember this. Never underestimate anyone based on their skin color or their job." Without waiting for his response, Claire turned and left the boardroom, leaving everyone in stunned admiration. She knew this moment had forever changed how they saw her. No longer would she be the invisible woman they overlooked. Claire had proven that true worth lies not in appearance or social status, but in dignity, intellect, and the courage to face any challenge. The conference room door clicked shut behind Claire, and a heavy silence settled over the vast space. Richard Hamilton sat motionless, his eyes fixed on the crisp, precise words Claire had so carefully translated and highlighted. Each page laid bare the imminent danger like a dagger aimed straight at his heart and reputation. Richard felt his face go pale, a chill running through him. He had never experienced fear like this. The gut-wrenching realization that he'd nearly driven his entire company off a cliff. Hamilton Technologies, the empire he'd spent over 20 years building, had been saved from a billion-dollar takeover thanks to the black woman he'd always belittled and mocked. The thought both relieved and humiliated him. Robert Andrews, the executive vice president, broke the suffocating silence. "Richard, we almost lost everything." Richard glanced around, seeing panic and doubt in his colleague's eyes. But above all, he saw something deeper. Profound disappointment, a loss of faith in the leadership and judgment he once prided himself on. Diane Sterling, the CFO, spoke next, her voice trembling with reproach. "I can't believe this, Richard. How did our legal team miss something like this? How did a housekeeper uncover such a massive loophole while we were completely blind?" Diane's words struck Richard like a punch to the gut. He lowered his head, trying to hide the shame swelling inside him. Always proud, always so confident in his own judgment of people. Now he faced the truth, that the woman he'd scorned, whom he'd never once bothered to know, was the only person to save him from the worst catastrophe of his career. "This is entirely my fault," Richard confessed in a near whisper, a stark contrast to his usual self-assured tone. "I was arrogant and complacent. I never imagined—" He trailed off, his voice choked by overwhelming shame, that Claire could understand and translate this complex document so perfectly. Diane cut in, still seething. "Richard, it's not just about the translation. You never valued her. You never saw her as a real person with talent and worth." Richard looked at Diane, shame and confusion in his eyes. She was right. For more than 20 years he'd treated Claire as a household convenience, something easily replaced. He'd never cared about her life or known of the hardships she'd endured. He remembered now Claire's steady, composed gaze as she presented her findings to everyone. In that moment, he realized how little he truly knew about the woman who had quietly cared for his family all those years. Robert's voice cut in, grave and serious. Richard, this isn't a small oversight. We almost lost control of our core technology and internal data. A hair's breadth from now, this company wouldn't exist. Richard nodded slowly, his palms slick with cold sweat. He'd never felt so powerless and afraid. A crushing sense of failure and loss of control washed over him, making him feel weaker than he ever had in his life. He glanced down at the dossier again, remorse tightening his chest as he recalled the cruel joke he'd played on Claire just the night before. It pained him to realize that his own blind arrogance and prejudice had nearly destroyed everything he'd built. Richard rose to his feet, striving to steady himself. "I will take full responsibility for this. I must make amends immediately." "How do you intend to do that?" Diane asked, skepticism in her tone. Richard lifted his head, his eyes for the first time free of arrogance and filled with genuine resolve. "I will do what I should have done long ago. I will apologize to Claire sincerely in front of everyone, and I will ensure she receives the recognition and respect she rightly deserves for her skill and contributions." The board members stared at Richard in stunned silence. For the first time, they witnessed real humility from the man known for his hubris. But Richard knew this wasn't about personal pride anymore. This was his duty to the company, and above all, to the woman he had unwittingly mistreated for 2 decades. He drew a deep breath, pushing back the panic and shame flooding him. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but this was his chance to right his wrongs, reclaim his own integrity, and restore justice to the woman he had long undervalued. Richard stood silent before the small door leading down to the kitchen, Claire's daily refuge for more than 2 decades. He hesitated, his hand trembling as it touched the cold doorknob. A wave of unease mixed with shame pressed on his chest, but he knew he couldn't avoid this any longer. Taking a deep breath, he gently pushed the door open. Inside, Claire was quietly arranging her familiar kitchen tools. Morning sunlight filtered through the small window, casting a soft glow over her slender frame. Yet it couldn't hide the tired lines at the corners of her eyes, the silent traces of 20 years of unseen sacrifice he'd never noticed. "Claire," Richard said softly, his voice suddenly hesitant and unfamiliar, a stark contrast to his usual arrogance. Claire turned to look at him, her expression calm but distant, as if she'd been preparing for this moment for a long time. "What is it, Mr. Hamilton?" she asked, her tone no longer the obedient sweetness he was used to, but clear and resolute. Richard felt his heart tighten at her chilly words. He stepped further into the room, awkward shame catching in his throat. "I wanted to talk with you, Claire. I owe you an apology." Claire's face remained composed. She set down her kitchen towel on the counter and met his gaze as if looking straight into his soul. "What are you apologizing for, Mr. Hamilton? Yesterday evening, or these past 20 years? Richard jumped at her pointed question as though she'd stripped bare all his thoughts. He swallowed hard, searching for words that felt trivial against such stark truth. "For everything," he finally admitted, his voice shaking. "I'm sorry for treating you so poorly, for my contempt and neglect over all these years." Claire was silent for a moment, her eyes still locked on him. Then she spoke softly but firmly, each word carrying weight. "Mr. Hamilton, when I first walked into this house 20 years ago, I knew I was just a maid. What I never expected was that during all those years of devoted service, I would never be seen as a real person. You never asked me how I felt or what my life was like. You never knew my real name, my past, or the pain I endured simply because of my skin color." Richard lowered his head, feeling as though he'd just received a cruel slap. Claire's words were a mirror reflecting his deep selfishness and wrongdoing. Her voice caught slightly as she continued, but remained unwavering. "I cared for your children as if they were my own. But when they grew up, they treated me just as you did, like I was invisible. I cared for your late wife in her final battle with cancer. Yet you never once asked if I was tired or hurting. You never saw me, Mr. Hamilton. To you, I was just a convenient, replaceable black maid, unworthy of respect or concern." Richard closed his eyes, each of Claire's words stabbing at his heart. He felt small and contemptible in the face of her painful truth. When he finally looked up, his eyes were filled with genuine remorse for the first time in his life. "I know you may never forgive me, Claire," he said quietly, "but I truly am sorry for my callousness and unfair treatment. I don't know how to make up for what I've done, but I want you to know how deeply I regret it." Claire studied him for a long moment. Then she sighed, her expression softening slightly, yet still resolute. "An apology isn't enough, Mr. Hamilton. What I expect is for you to rethink how you treat others, especially those who are small, marginalized, and people of color like me. You have no idea how deeply your racism and indifference have wounded me. Remember that every person deserves respect, no matter who they are, the color of their skin, or the work they do." Richard nodded slowly, guilt heavy in his heart. "I promise you, Claire, I will change. I will ensure this never happens again, not just to you, but to anyone in my company or my family." Claire was quiet for a moment longer. Then she nodded. "I hope you truly mean that. Not just for me, but for yourself, for everyone who works for you, and for the future of your family." Richard looked at Claire, and for the first time truly saw her, strong, resilient, and deeply compassionate. He knew this conversation had opened a new path, a chance to correct the grave mistakes he'd made over 2 decades. He exhaled, gratitude and hope mingling in his chest, understanding that at last he was stepping onto the right path, one of genuine understanding, respect, and compassion. The moment Claire finished speaking, a heavy silence fell over the small kitchen, as weighty as the emotions swelling in both their hearts. Richard stood still, his gaze fixed on the floor as if seeking courage there to face his wrongs. Claire remained upright, her eyes strong yet compassionate, waiting for the reaction of the powerful man before her. Finally, Richard drew a deep, shuddering breath, as if attempting to shake off all the shame and burden crushing him. He slowly raised his head and met Claire's eyes with an unprecedented sincerity. "Claire, I know words can't erase the pain I've caused you. I've been thoughtless and selfish, but I don't want to stop at an apology. I want to do something truly meaningful to make up for the years you've endured." Claire furrowed her brow slightly, suspicion flickering in her gaze, but she said nothing as she listened. Richard stepped closer, his voice firm. "First, I want to fulfill the promise I made last night. You completed that translation brilliantly, saving the company from catastrophic loss. So, the $500,000 I promised, I'll transfer it to you right away." Richard reached into his jacket pocket, withdrew a personal check. uncapped an expensive fountain pen and carefully wrote the large sum. His hand trembled with emotion and tension as he wrote. He knew this money couldn't fully make up for all Claire had suffered, but it was at least a start, an act of genuine apology rather than empty words. Claire stared at the check, wide-eyed and taken aback. She shook her head lightly, her voice gentle but resolute. "Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Truly, but I don't need that kind of money. What I did was simply my responsibility as someone with self-respect." Richard shook his head, his eyes unwavering. "Claire, this isn't charity or pity. It's a small measure of the recognition you deserve. Please accept it as my first act of restitution." Claire studied Richard silently for a long moment, gauging the sincerity behind his words. Finally, she nodded and accepted the check with hands that trembled slightly. She felt a mix of relief and awkwardness at this unexpected, decisive gesture from a man she'd never seen so earnest. But Richard was not finished. He inhaled deeply, his gaze more focused and serious than ever as he continued. "I know this may surprise you further, but I'm completely serious. I want you to take on a new position within the company, one that truly matches your skills and experience." Claire gasped, astonishment in her eyes. "A new position, are you sure, Mr. Hamilton?" "I've never been more certain," Richard replied decisively, without hesitation. "I want you to serve as a senior leader in our international division, directly overseeing all critical contracts and projects with foreign partners. I know you're the best person for the role." Claire fell silent, her eyes wide with amazement. Her heart raced with a mixture of excitement and profound emotion. She had never imagined that the man who'd belittled her for 20 years would stand before her and offer such a significant role. This proposal was not only an acknowledgement of her expertise, it was Richard's deepest apology, proof that he truly recognized her worth. Richard continued, voice steady and sincere. "I made a grave mistake in failing to recognize your value and ability. I let prejudice and racism cloud my judgment. But I promise you, I will change. And I believe that with your talent and dedication, you will lead this company beyond anything I've ever imagined." Claire remained silent, emotions swirling in her chest, joy, pride, and a touch of disbelief. She knew this offer could forever alter her life, drawing her back to a path she thought she'd abandoned. Seeing her hesitation, Richard added gently, "I understand. You may need time to consider this, Claire. That's perfectly fine. But I want you to know how serious I am, and how much I hope you'll say yes. The company needs you, and so do I." Claire took a slow, steadying breath, feeling the weight and significance of the decision before her. She looked up at Richard, determination and inner strength shining clearly in her eyes. "I will give your offer serious thought, Mr. Hamilton, but I also need you to promise me one thing. Going forward, this company must change completely. There must be no more racism or prejudice. Not even in the smallest way." Richard nodded firmly, his voice resolute and heartfelt. "You have my word, Claire. I will do everything in my power to ensure that. From today on, you will never again endure indifference or discrimination." Claire met Richard's gaze, sensing the genuine sincerity in his words. For the first time in many years, she felt true relief and trust, an unwavering faith in the future, in justice, and in the transformative power of sincerity and compassion. Claire's gaze lingered on Richard's face, as if weighing every ounce of sincerity hidden in his powerful features. She took a deep breath, realizing this was the moment to voice the conditions she had harbored for years, conditions she knew more clearly and firmly than ever before. "I appreciate the sincerity of your offer, Mr. Hamilton," Claire said slowly, her tone cautious but unmistakably clear. "But I cannot accept without certain guarantees. This isn't just important to me, it's essential for the entire company." Richard nodded immediately, understanding that any condition Claire proposed was both reasonable and necessary. "Please go ahead, Claire. I'm ready to hear all your terms." Claire looked him squarely in the eye, her expression more serious and sharp than ever. "First, I need absolute assurance of my personal safety. I will not become a target for anyone inside or outside the company who might resent your decision, and my real identity, Michelle Carter, must remain completely confidential." Richard instantly grasped the gravity of her request. He knew all too well the power of prejudice and the dangers Claire had faced in her past. "I promise you, Claire, the company will protect your identity and your safety at all costs. I will only publicize your professional credentials without revealing anything about your history or personal life." Claire nodded in approval but pressed on, her voice firm. "I also need flexibility in my work schedule. I will come into the office when necessary, but I must also have the freedom to work from home or wherever I deem appropriate." Richard did not hesitate. "That's completely reasonable, Claire. I trust your ability to manage your time and workload." Claire paused, drawing in a deep breath, as if steeling herself for her final and most critical condition, one that would not only protect her, but lay the foundation for a better future for everyone at the company. "And finally, the most important point," she said, meeting Richard's eyes with unwavering resolve. "You must publicly commit to a complete cultural overhaul. All forms of racial discrimination, no matter how small, must be eradicated. I will not tolerate any jokes or insults regarding skin color, race, or social status from anyone in the company, especially its leadership." Richard was silent for a long moment, truly absorbing Claire's words. He recognized that this wasn't merely a request. It was a non-negotiable demand. If he was serious about making amends, discriminatory culture had not only been his personal failing, but a chronic disease that had silently spread throughout the organization for years. "I understand, Claire," Richard finally said, his voice solemn and sincere. "I commit to leading a top-down transformation. We will review and revise every policy and procedure to ensure no trace of discrimination remains. I will personally announce this to the entire company and will tolerate no breaches of this pledge." Claire watched Richard's face as he spoke. She saw genuine seriousness and sincerity, but she still felt compelled to emphasize once more. "Mr. Hamilton, you must grasp how critical this is. This isn't something you can fix with empty words. You will need to change from the inside out, from how you treat employees to how the company values every person." Richard met her gaze, feeling the weight of responsibility in her words like never before. He nodded firmly, respect and determination shining in his eyes. "I understand more clearly than ever, Claire. What I promise today is not just a duty, but a personal and moral obligation to you and to every employee who has suffered injustice here." Claire studied him quietly for a moment, then extended her hand, a symbol of approval and partnership. Richard stepped forward and took her hand sincerely. That handshake marked a profound commitment between them. "I accept your conditions, Claire. I will not disappoint you," Richard said softly, his voice rich with genuine emotion. Claire offered a small, warm smile. The first time her smile had carried such clear warmth and hope. "I hope you truly follow through, Mr. Hamilton. Not just for me, but for everyone at this company who deserves respect and fair recognition." Richard nodded gently, fully aware that this was the greatest turning point of his life, the moment he truly became the man he always believed himself to be, and the opportunity given to him by no one else but Claire Thompson, the woman he had so thoughtlessly underestimated for more than 20 years. Richard's sincere commitment quickly rippled through the company like a wave of change, bringing both hope and anxiety. But not everyone was pleased or ready to embrace such a radical shift. Beneath forced smiles, skeptical and wary glances sprang up in the hidden corners of the organization. From the very first day Claire entered her new office in the international department, she felt the chill and distance of a clique of veteran directors led by David Walker, the long-standing executive director of foreign affairs, famous for his conservative views and attachment to outdated traditions. David had never concealed his opposition to the diversity policies Richard had publicly announced. At Claire's first internal meeting as department head, David repeatedly interrupted her, deliberately tossing out complex jargon and pointed questions to show his blatant lack of cooperation. Though her other colleagues remained silent, their anxious, hesitant stares spoke volumes, as if they expected Claire to stumble at this initial hurdle. But Claire was not easily rattled by such provocations. With her trademark calm, she answered David's toughest questions with astonishing professionalism and clarity, leaving him no opening to continue his attacks. When the meeting ended, everyone was stunned to see even David forced to grudgingly acknowledge Claire's superior expertise, his face still brimming with resentment. Yet the resistance did not end there. In the days that followed, Claire faced invisible roadblocks set up by David's closest allies. Critical documents mysteriously went missing before major meetings. The information she needed to make decisions was delayed or delivered incompletely at the last minute. Claire recognized this was no accident, but a deliberate plan to pressure her into abandoning a position they believed she did not deserve. Rumors also circulated viciously throughout the company, claiming Claire had been appointed only because of Richard's personal favoritism and not on her own merits. They said the diversity policy was a mere cover for unfair preferential treatment, predicting she would fail spectacularly. Claire was well aware of these whispers, but instead of getting drawn into anger or doubt, she chose silence and poured all her energy into her work. Armed with the resilience forged by years of injustice, Claire began to prove her worth in the most concrete way possible. Within just a few short weeks, Claire successfully closed several complex international contracts that had long challenged the department. She leveraged her deep cultural knowledge, linguistic skill, and negotiation expertise to resolve conflicts of interest and secure agreements that far exceeded everyone's expectations. This success split the company into two camps. Some employees, especially younger, more progressive colleagues, gradually became convinced by Claire's exceptional competence and began treating her with genuine respect instead of reluctant acceptance. However, David and his cronies refused to abandon their plan to undermine her. They secretly convened a small meeting of senior directors to plot even greater pressure, hoping to force Claire to relinquish her new role. But their schemes could not stay hidden for long. Richard, now truly awakened to his earlier failures, had been watching closely and was fully aware of the internal machinations. One late afternoon, he personally came to Claire's office, his face a mix of concern and anger. "I know exactly what David and some others have been doing to you, Claire. I'm deeply sorry and outraged by their actions. If you wish, I'm prepared to fire anyone involved. Just say the word." Claire offered him a gentle but confident smile. "Mr. Hamilton, I appreciate your concern, but I don't want anyone dismissed. I'll prove to them, on my own, that they were wrong to underestimate me. In the end, results and performance will speak louder than any rumor." Richard looked at Claire with growing respect and nodded in agreement. He understood more clearly than ever that this remarkable woman was not only talented and strong, she possessed a rare dignity and resolve enough to overcome any obstacle or challenge. In the weeks that followed, Claire continued steadily surmounting every hurdle. She not only excelled at each project, but gradually changed the attitudes of those who had opposed her. Even David, though never public in his admission, was forced to witness Claire's undeniable successes in silence. Ultimately, Claire proved to everyone that she deserved her position and recognition, not because of favoritism or special treatment, but simply on the strength of her own ability and character. In that powerful silence, she became a living symbol of positive change and a testament to the power of overcoming prejudice and injustice through competence, courage, and heart. Claire's successive successes in the international department gradually shifted the company's atmosphere. Those who had doubted and hesitated before began to show her genuine respect, but that only deepened the envy and hostility among those unwilling to embrace change. Behind courteous smiles and hollow praise, a dark conspiracy was quietly taking shape, waiting for its moment to plunge Claire into a bitter downfall. At the head of that scheme stood none other than Kevin Morgan, senior vice president and one of the company's most powerful figures. Sharp and ambitious, Kevin was also notorious for his rigid conservatism and his quietly ingrained racial biases. The idea that Claire, a black woman from the lowest rung of the company hierarchy, in his view, should wield authority equal to his, was intolerable. One late evening, Kevin secretly summoned a handful of trusted allies to a private conference room on the top floor of the Hamilton building. The dim light cast cold, calculating shadows across the faces of these powerful men, creating an atmosphere of tense, ominous foreboding. Seated at the head of the table, Kevin regarded his colleagues with steely eyes and spoke in a grave tone. "We cannot allow someone like Claire Thompson to continue leading the international department. The changes she's implementing aren't just unsettling the company. They directly threaten our interests. If we don't remove her soon, it'll be us who lose control." One director, Michael Donovan, head of finance, hesitated before speaking. "But Claire has been doing an excellent job. If we move openly against her, Richard won't let us get away with it." Kevin's smile was icy, his gaze sharper than ever. "We don't need an open confrontation. I have a far more discreet and effective plan. Just one major mistake, enough to shake the company's confidence in her, and Richard himself won't be able to protect her." A hush fell as skeptical and curious glances turned toward Kevin. He slowly produced a thick file, placed it on the table, and outlined his scheme step by step. They would sabotage a crucial upcoming contract worth over $100 million with Sentinel. by subtly altering key documents at the last minute, introducing unfavorable clauses that Claire wouldn't spot in time, they would engineer a financial loss so severe that all blame would fall on her. Kevin paused, a malicious grin curling his lips. "We'll ensure every piece of evidence points squarely at Claire. Then Richard and the board will have no choice but to declare her unfit for the position, perhaps even revert her to her old role." Around the table, some directors nodded in silent agreement. Others shared satisfied looks, and the dark plot was set in motion. Each member of Kevin's group was assigned to manipulate the internal documentation and data systems to create the lavish mistake Claire would discover too late to correct. What they didn't anticipate, however, was that Claire was no easy mark. Years of silently enduring injustice had honed her keen sense for detecting the slightest irregularity. The moment a few critical documents mysteriously disappeared and then reappeared with suspicious alterations, Claire knew something was terribly wrong. Without hesitation, she quietly began a thorough audit, tracing every minor change in the company's internal systems. She uncovered unauthorized access logs from computers in the finance department and even from Kevin's own office. Realizing the gravity of the conspiracy, Claire discreetly compiled all the necessary evidence, resolved to confront Kevin and his co-conspirators head-on. One late afternoon, she strode into Kevin's office unannounced. He blinked in surprise, but quickly masked it with his usual cold composure. "Claire, what can I do for you?" Claire met his gaze with unflinching resolve. "I think you know exactly why I'm here, Mr. Morgan. I'm aware of the plot you and several others have orchestrated to destroy my reputation and career." Kevin feigned nonchalance, a mocking smirk playing at his lips. "Claire, you're imagining things. You have no proof to back such baseless accusations." Claire's smile turned sharp as she calmly laid a thick dossier on his desk. "Here is all the evidence of your intentional interference, altering internal documents to engineer a catastrophic error in the Sentinel contract. I have enough information to prove that you and your allies are behind this." Kevin's face drained of color, genuine panic flashing in his eyes as he took in the undeniable proof before him. Claire continued, her voice firm and resolute. "I've endured enough of these dirty tricks, Mr. Morgan. I will not allow you to destroy my career and my reputation again." Kevin fell silent, experiencing for the first time the full force of the indomitable resolve of the woman he had so long underestimated. Claire left his office with unwavering determination, knowing this battle was not yet over, but also that she had just won a crucial victory, the triumph of truth over darkness, and the victory of dignity over vile conspiracy. The moment the door to Kevin's office clicked shut behind her, Claire understood that the real battle was only just beginning. Kevin's sharp, furious glare as she left still burned in her mind, a reminder that he wouldn't give up easily. But this time, Claire was ready. She knew that justice doesn't come on its own. It must be won through courage, intelligence, and relentless perseverance. Over the next few days, Claire quietly reached out to a handful of honest, trustworthy colleagues. One was Sarah Mitchell, the head of HR, who had long opposed the lurking racism within the company. As soon as Claire shared the evidence she'd gathered, Sarah pledged her full support. At the same time, Claire enlisted the help of Jonathan Reed, her old friend, who had aided her with the technical translation. Jonathan agreed to comb through the system logs and file histories for any trace of tampering. With his assistance, Claire quickly assembled rock-solid technical proof showing that Kevin and his co-conspirators had manipulated and altered internal documents to engineer a serious company crisis. A week later, Claire decided it was time for decisive action. She asked Richard to convene an emergency meeting of all senior leadership to lay out the truth. Once Richard learned the full extent of the conspiracy, he immediately agreed and pledged his unwavering backing. That morning, the tension in the grand conference room was palpable. Every director and senior manager was present, their eyes flicking between curiosity and concern, as Claire took her place at the front. Kevin sat in a corner, his expression icy, but his eyes betraying worry. Richard stood and spoke, his voice solemn and authoritative. Today's emergency meeting is to address a grave matter relating to our upcoming international contract with Sentinel. Claire Thompson has uncovered an internal sabotage plot, and I believe everyone deserves to hear the facts. He nodded to Claire an encouragement. Claire rose, stepped before the large screen, and began her presentation with calm confidence. Good morning, everyone. I'm not here to speak about myself, but to uphold the justice and integrity we claim as core company values. Over the past weeks, I've uncovered a dangerous scheme designed to ruin my reputation and to inflict significant harm on the company. Claire methodically displayed each piece of evidence: unauthorized computer access logs, deliberately altered document files, and secretly recorded conversations. Every item was clear, irrefutable, and directly implicated Kevin Morgan and his inner circle. Kevin's face drained of color. Cold sweat beaded on his forehead, and his hands trembled beneath the table as the evidence flashed on the screen. He leapt to his feet, attempting to cut Claire off in a voice shaky with rage. This is all fabricated slander. You're trying to destroy me to cover up your own incompetence, Miss Thompson. But Claire remained unflinching, meeting his gaze with steely resolve. Mr. Morgan, every piece of evidence has been verified by independent technical experts. You cannot deny that you and your associates intentionally tampered with crucial documents to inflict serious damage and pin the blame on me. A profound silence fell as every eye turned to Kevin, awaiting his response. He had nothing more to say. He knew, as well as anyone, that no excuse could withstand such definitively documented proof. Richard rose once more, his tone grave and decisive. Kevin Morgan, I am deeply disappointed and outraged by this betrayal. You've not only targeted a valued colleague, but jeopardized the company's interests and reputation. In light of this incontrovertible evidence, I hereby terminate your employment effective immediately and will pursue all necessary legal actions. Kevin stood frozen, his face ashen. He slipped out of the room without a word, the weighty silence of stunned onlookers marking his departure. Turning to the assembled leadership, Richard's voice brimmed with genuine emotion. Today's events are a stark wake-up call, not just for me, but for this entire organization. We cannot tolerate any form of racism or abuse of power. Now is the time to change how we treat one another, to build a workplace that is fair and respectful to everyone, regardless of race or background. The room full of directors and managers nodded in solemn agreement, their eyes filled with respect and admiration for Claire. She gave a small, relieved smile, her heart swelling with pride. This victory wasn't merely personal. It was a triumph of dignity, justice, and truth over prejudice and dark conspiracy. A year has flown by since that dramatic meeting, but the memory of justice being served remains vivid in every Hamilton Technologies employee's mind. Profound and sweeping changes have been implemented thoroughly, infusing the entire company with fresh energy. The atmosphere in every office, every conference room, and in every exchanged glance is more open, sincere, and warm than ever before. Claire Thompson has now been officially promoted to Senior Director, overseeing both the international division and corporate culture. Her role extends beyond ambitious contracts and global projects. It includes supervising, promoting, and nurturing a culture of equality, diversity, and respect throughout the organization. The bold policies Claire introduced, backed unequivocally by Richard, have completely transformed the company's landscape. Every employee, regardless of race, gender, background, or job title, is now evaluated fairly based on their abilities and character. Transparency and equity have become core principles in every company decision, leaving no room for prejudice or discrimination. Richard Hamilton, once a man harboring deep-seated biases, has also undergone a complete transformation. His past mistakes taught him the full scope of his responsibilities, not only to Claire, but to every employee. On the one-year anniversary of that pivotal meeting, Richard decided to convene a company-wide assembly to announce key changes and to publicly apologize to all staff who had suffered injustice or racism under his leadership in the previous company culture. That day, the large conference room was packed, each face reflecting hope and belief in the positive changes underway. Standing at the podium, Richard's voice trembled with emotion, yet rang with sincerity. "I was wrong, and I know it," he began. "Today, in front of all of you, I want to offer my deepest, most sincere apology to Claire Thompson, the remarkable woman who taught me the most important lesson of my life. I also apologize to every employee of color at this company who endured injustice and prejudice because of me and the culture we once had." He paused, then continued with resolve. "From this day forward, Hamilton Technologies is committed to building a workplace that is completely fair, transparent, and free of discrimination. Every opportunity will be granted to all employees equitably. I promise to defend and advance this culture vigorously and without compromise." Thunderous applause filled the room, and emotional faces turned toward Claire, who sat in the front row, offering a humble yet proud smile. This was the moment she had always dreamed of, but never dared to believe could happen. A moment when justice was served, truth was honored, and human dignity was unequivocally affirmed. Immediately after the meeting, Claire returned to her new office, a bright, spacious suite on the top floor of the building once reserved for only the most powerful executives like Richard or Kevin. On her desk sat a small but profoundly significant nameplate engraved, "Claire Thompson, Senior Director of International Relations and Corporate Culture." Claire picked up the nameplate slowly, emotion welling up inside her. It was more than a title. It was the resurrection of her personal honor, a testament to her perseverance, courage, and steadfast fight against injustice and prejudice. She glanced out the window at the vast sky, awash with light and promise. She remembered her early days, entering the Hamilton estate as an invisible housekeeper, enduring contempt and cold indifference. She recalled every step that had carried her through prejudice and dark schemes to arrive at this moment. Standing tall in senior leadership with rightful pride and unbroken dignity. A soft knock sounded at the door. Richard entered with a genuine smile, holding a cup of coffee he'd made for her. "I just wanted to thank you again, Claire," he said, handing her the coffee. "What you've done hasn't just saved this company, it's saved me from myself." Claire returned his smile, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Your sincerity and resolve to change gave me hope that anyone can become better." Richard nodded, his eyes resting respectfully on the nameplate. "I know how far you've come to get here. I hope from now on you'll never doubt your worth and your strength." When Richard left, Claire stared at her nameplate once more, deeply moved. She placed it in the most prominent position on her desk, a powerful affirmation of the justice, equality, and self-respect she had always believed in. Outside, the brilliant sun lit up the sky, a promise of a hopeful future ahead, a future where human dignity is always upheld, where justice and truth triumph over prejudice and injustice. In that future, Claire Thompson will forever stand as a living symbol of resilience, the power of self-respect, and an unwavering belief in the true value of every person,